Wounded, but unbroken, her hidden training shocked the SEAL medic and everyone around her. Nobody on that road expected what was about to happen. Not the soldiers packed into those trucks, not the medic sitting 2 vehicles ahead, and definitely not the woman in the 3rd truck, the one quietly watching the mountains through a dusty window, already bleeding from a bullet wound in her leg, still completely focused, still doing her job like it was just another day. But this story doesn't start with the ambush. It starts years before that, in a small town in New Mexico, with a quiet decision that nobody around her knew about, a decision that ended up saving 3 lives. Her name was Captain Elena. She grew up in a military family. Her father served in Vietnam. Her older brother deployed to Iraq. Joining the army wasn't a big surprising moment for her. It was almost expected. She enlisted at 19, became a combat medic, worked her way up steadily over the years. The people around her liked her. She was calm. She was capable. She never made a big deal out of herself. And that last part, it turns out, was the most important thing about her. About 4 years before the day we're talking about, Elena was on a training exercise when something went badly wrong. A young soldier got hurt, and the injury itself wasn't the kind that was supposed to end in death. It was serious, yes, but survivable. Except it didn't survive, because between the moment the injury happened and the moment proper help arrived, there was a gap. Just a gap. A small window where the right knowledge in the right hands could have made a completely different ending. The medic present that day wasn't a bad person. He wasn't a coward. He just wasn't prepared for that exact combination of injury, environment, and pressure. And in that gap, that tiny, awful space, a 23-year-old man with a wife and a daughter waiting back home ran out of time. Elena drove home that night without speaking. She didn't talk about what she saw. She didn't post anything. She didn't cry in front of anyone. She just sat alone with it, and somewhere in that silence, she made a decision, a simple, private, completely quiet decision. She was going to make sure that gap never existed around her again, not if she could close it, not if she was willing to put in the work. She started asking around for the right teacher. Through a mutual contact in the special operations community, she eventually heard about a man named Hale, Victor Hale. He had spent 12 years as a Navy SEAL medic. He had trained Special Forces personnel in some of the most advanced and extreme trauma techniques that exist. He had retired to Montana, running low-key weekend courses for search and rescue volunteers. He kept a quiet life. Elena tracked him down, asked for a meeting, and drove 14 hours to sit across from him. He told her she was wasting his time. She told him she would drive back every single weekend and train alone in his yard if he refused to work with her. She wasn't being dramatic. She meant every word of it. He stared at her for a long moment, and then he told her to come back on Saturday. She did, and from the very first session, he was hard on her. He didn't go easy. He pushed her the way he had pushed active operators in real training pipelines. She never once asked him to slow down or ease up. She just kept coming back. Over the next 4 years, 48 months of weekends, leave days, and hours she carved out of her own time, Elena learned things that most military medics never even see. Tactical combat casualty care at the Special Operations Standard. Trauma management in environments where there is no hospital, no proper supplies, and no backup coming. How to handle patients who are combative, confused, or going into shock. Improvised techniques for keeping a person alive when all the textbook options are gone. She paid for every single trip herself. She paid for every course herself. She told no one, not her commanding officers, not her family, not a single person in her unit. This was not arrogance. This was not about being secretive for the sake of it. It was something much simpler and harder to explain. She was preparing for a moment she couldn't see yet, and she didn't want to describe it to anyone before it arrived and proved her right. She just wanted to be ready, not mostly ready, not ready enough, completely, deeply, thoroughly ready, before the moment ever came. Now cut to a mountain pass in northeastern Afghanistan. The convoy is moving through a narrow stretch of road. 6 trucks, 22 people. Elena is riding in the 3rd vehicle, leaning against the door, watching the hillside the way she always watches landscapes, not nervously, but with focused attention. Something about the way the rocks are sitting feels off. She can't name it yet. Then the first explosion hits the lead truck, and everything breaks open at once. The ambush is coordinated, attackers positioned on high ground on both sides of the road, which means there's no clean way to push forward or fall back. The radio becomes a wall of overlapping voices. Thick smoke rolls across the road. Elena is out of the truck before it even fully stops moving. She catches a bullet through her left thigh in the first few seconds of the fight. She doesn't stop. She checks the wound instantly, the way she has trained herself to check, and confirms the large artery is still intact. She is bleeding, but she is standing. She wraps the wound herself, using one hand, without looking down, in under 12 seconds. And then she keeps going, because there are other people on that road who need her more. The SEAL medic assigned to this mission, the man whose entire job it was to handle medical emergencies, takes shrapnel to his right shoulder around 90 seconds into the engagement. His clavicle is likely cracked. His arm stops working. He is awake and thinking clearly, but his dominant hand is out of the fight, and his medical kit is sitting 10 feet away in the dirt. Elena gets to it before he figures out how to reach it himself. She moves to the first critical patient. Before she even kneels down, the sound of his breathing tells her what she's dealing with. Sucking chest wound, air entering the chest cavity with every breath, building pressure, making it harder to breathe with each passing second. Without intervention, he has a few minutes at most. Elena reaches into the kit, finds the right needle, and performs a needle chest decompression, a precise procedure that most medics train for but rarely have to execute under fire. She places it exactly where it needs to go, without any hesitation, without a single moment of self-doubt. His breathing changes. He is going to make it. From the ground about 6 feet away, the SEAL medic is watching her. He has 11 years in the teams. He has been in 8 combat deployments. He has worked alongside some of the most trained medical professionals in the U.S. military. And he has never, not once, seen a standard Army combat medic perform that procedure with that kind of speed and certainty. What he's watching is not what basic training produces. He knows what basic training produces. He has spent his career building on top of it. Elena doesn't stop. She moves to the second patient. Femoral bleed, the large artery running through the thigh, the kind of injury that drains a person in minutes if nothing is done. She applies the tourniquet in 11 seconds flat, marks the exact time on the patient's skin with a black marker so that every person who touches him afterward knows when the clock started. When she runs low on hemostatic gauze, she tears a section of uniform material and builds an improvised pressure pack, holding it in place with her own knee while she talks to the patient. Not soft, reassuring words, just direct, steady talk, the kind that comes from someone who has already made up their mind that this person is going to live. The third patient is the most complicated one. The vehicle blast has caused a brain injury. His pupils are unequal. He is combative, disoriented and thrashing, with no real understanding of where he is or what is happening. Trying to manage a confused, non-compliant patient in the middle of an active firefight, while personally bleeding from your own wound, while also monitoring 2 other critically injured people, while directing other soldiers to maintain pressure on the second patient. This is the scenario that collapses people who haven't prepared for it. Elena does not collapse. She talks the patient down with careful, measured words. She manages his airway. She keeps him from hurting himself or anyone near him. She holds the whole thing together with the calm of someone who has walked through this situation in her mind so many times that there is simply no room left for panic. The shooting stops. The medevac helicopter arrives 31 minutes after the first explosion. In the short, strange quiet between the last gunshot and the sound of the rotors approaching, the SEAL medic manages to push himself up to sitting. He watches Elena finish packaging the third patient for transport, checking every detail, adjusting, making sure everything is right before handing him off. She has been on her feet this entire time. She is still bleeding from her thigh. She has not mentioned it once. He looks across the road at her. There is one question in his head, the question that has been building since he first watched her move. Who trained you? Elena sits down against the truck tire. She looks at her hands for a moment. Then she looks back at him. Nobody sent me. I just decided I needed to know. All 3 soldiers survived. The first patient, the chest wound, spent 3 weeks in a military hospital in Germany and eventually returned to duty. The second patient, the femoral bleed, lost the lower portion of his leg below the knee, but the tourniquet had arrived in time to save his life. The third patient spent 6 months in rehabilitation and came back to limited service. 3 men, 3 families, 3 futures that came very close to not existing. The SEAL medic wrote a detailed formal report documenting every intervention Elena performed, in order, with full medical description. He wasn't required to write it. He wrote it because what he witnessed needed to be on record, described by someone who actually understood what they were looking at. The report moved through multiple levels of command. Nobody knew quite what to do with it, because what it described didn't fit the expected profile of a standard Army combat medic. He later tracked down Victor Hale and called him. He described what he had seen. There was a long pause on the line. Then Hale said quietly, "I know. She was ready when she left me. I just didn't know she'd need to use all of it at once." Elena declined interview requests. She accepted a commendation medal at a small private ceremony with only her unit present. When her commanding general asked what she wanted people to take from her story, she didn't make a speech. She said, "Stop waiting to be assigned the knowledge you already know you need. Go get it. Nobody's going to hand it to you in the middle of a firefight." 6 months after the ambush, she visited the second patient at a rehabilitation center in San Antonio. He was learning to walk on a prosthetic. Some days were hard. Some days he felt proud of how far he had come. But every day he was alive, and his daughter had visited twice that month. Elena didn't bring flowers. She brought a tactical combat casualty care manual and a handwritten list. Every course she had taken, every book she had read, every weekend spent in Montana, every skill built over 4 years of private, self-funded, completely voluntary preparation. She set it on the table beside his bed. He picked it up and looked at it for a long time. He looked at the dates. He looked at how many weekends were on that list. He looked at the amounts she had paid out of her own pocket, for training she was never required to do, for a situation she had no guarantee would ever arrive. "Why are you giving this to me?" She gave a small smile, the kind that belongs to people who have already started thinking about the next thing, because you might be the one who saves the next person. She stood up to leave, and you should be ready before you need to be. That is the whole story. A woman watched someone die from a gap she believed she could have closed. She decided to close it, quietly, privately, over 4 years, without telling a single person. And when the moment finally arrived on a smoky road in the mountains, with everything going wrong around her, she was ready. Not almost ready. Ready. The kind of ready that only comes from doing the work long before anyone asks you to. 3 men are alive because of a decision she made alone in a parking lot 4 years before she ever met them. That is what preparation looks like when it's real. That is what it means to be wounded, and completely, stubbornly, powerfully unbroken. Wounded but unbroken. True real-life story.